And everybody had a wonderful break over the Christmas holidays and New Year holidays, and had some time with family and friends, and that's really critical. So thank you for that. I do want to start our meeting with a territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land on which our school and district buildings are situated is the traditional, unceded, and unceded territory of the Algonquin people. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples on the land on which we gather here today. So to start our committee of the whole meeting, I would like to proceed with the attendance, if I could, please. Chair Boland.
Here.
Vice Chair Humphreys is here. Trustee Dobson.
Here.
Trustee Doherty.
Here.
He is virtual. Thank you. Trustee Gannett.
Here.
Trustee Kaiser has sent his regrets. Trustee Primo. Haven't heard from Trustee Primo. Trustee Rajamani.
Here.
She's also virtual. Trustee Reddy has sent her regrets. Student Trustee Grace Ding.
Here.
Nice to see you, Grace. Thank you. And Student Trustee Sydney Doherty has sent her regrets as well. Director Nemi here. Superintendent Barnes here. Superintendent Poirier here. Superintendent Smith here. Superintendent Kronwald.
Here.
Oh, there you are. You moved. It's Superintendent Nichols. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. All right. We do have an agenda before you today. Could I have a mover and a seconder for this agenda, please? Leo, thank you very much. And a seconder, Kim, thank you very much. All those in favor of the agenda today? And that's carried. And do we have any items of conflict of interest or any concerns of conflict of interest around the agenda items today? Seeing none, we'll move forward. I am going to ask Chair Boland to just say a couple of words before we get into our agenda.
Thank you. Just something that's come to my attention, so I just wanted to mention it. I just wanted to remind everybody that the board meetings are public. They are recorded and placed on the internet. So please be careful, not to mention any private or confidential information during these meetings. This includes like mentioning we're stating identifiers that could identify students, parents, families, or staff. So, right, just because we're in a public meeting, that we just want to keep the confidentiality of all of those people, up the upmost. All right. So thanks, Becky.
Good. Thanks, Leo. So that privacy piece is something we need to just keep in mind. All right, with that, we'll get into our first agenda item, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Kronwald to start us off.
Hi, so I'd like to introduce Sarah McPhear, principal of K-12 curriculum. It's going to share where we're at with early reading and specifically implementation of PPM 168, which is the mandatory early reading screening from year 2 of kindergarten to grade 2. Her team has done an amazing amount of time because there was timelines and everything and balancing stuff, and they've done some amazing work working with our early readers and teachers and staff in our building. So yeah, so she's going to share kind of where we're at and what we've done and what's next on our agenda for early reading. So
Thank you. All the nitty-gritty details are in the report, but I'll just start by saying that in 2022, the Ontario Human Rights Commission released its Right to Read inquiry report, and that document fueled a massive shift in the way students are taught literacy and reading. The Ministry of Education responded with changes to its language curriculum that reflect these reading-specific skills from an early age. And the PPM that Carrie mentioned came out in 2023, but was fully implemented this fall in 2024. And it can be kind of boiled down into 4 parts: instruction, screening, support for reading, and communication to families. So for the instruction piece, explicit and science-based instruction of reading is now in place, and it's mandated by the ministry to be 30 minutes daily or 150 minutes per week. The screening aspect, so once a year for all SK to grade 2 students, they are all to be screened in sometime between September and mid-November, and a second time before, like between February and mid-March, for all those students who did not meet the benchmark. Support for reading. So those not meeting the benchmark should have access to tiered supports. And communication to families. So specific results sent to families in a timely fashion after the first screening. And the results either met or did not meet benchmark are to be reported on the first report card, and that's coming up in February. And then for those that did not meet that first reading benchmark in February, the second screener, the results are shared then again on the June report card. So in terms of our CDSB's kind of response, instructions, so we began training teachers in a reading program. We call it UFly, but it's explicit systematic phonics instruction. So teachers started getting trained in 2022, and that training has continued. It continued all last school year, and this year we're kind of, anybody that's new, we were kind of doing that training. The screening, we've been following the NISI guidelines. So we finished our first round of screening. There's a little snapshot of those results, I believe, at the bottom of page 2 in your report. For the support for reading, so given the number of students in our, as you see, that are below benchmark, so we analyzed our board data to group into 3 groups according to need. And each group received specific support, including a meeting to discuss the data and look at the needs of the students in the particular group. Access to human resources. So we have inspired learning coaches and we have literacy support teachers, literacy intervention support teachers, and also a new physical book called Next Steps that was purchased to help those teachers in those classrooms. And the communication to families. So we developed a supporting reading development at home document, which went home to families shortly after the results were sent home in the fall. And hopefully that helped the families to understand and interpret the results. So that's it for my little snapshot on the 168. Like I said, the data's here. There's a timeline at the bottom of the second page. And there's lots of work still ahead of us, but we're off to a great start.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Questions, comments, wonderings about?
I don't know, go.
Okay, go ahead.
Waited,
Go ahead, Mike.
waited, just more of a comment. I'd just be interested in some sort of, especially with UFly and all these teachers being trained, it'd be interesting on some short-term, medium-term and long-term data, especially long-term, data. Like I see that there's 15% above benchmark and there's 13% below, like some sort of statistical analysis for down the road. Like this UFly things, I mean, I'm all for it. It's the foundation. If you don't have that, where do you really go? So it'd just be interesting to get, if they haven't already proposed something like that, it'd be really nice to have some short-term, medium-term and long-term benchmarks of, this group that is here, where do they go long-term? I just like to know that. I mean, I probably won't be around then, but it's still, I think it's a good idea. I mean, it's sort of the latest and greatest. We put a lot of time and effort into this. It's just nice to know statistically and where sort of what we're getting a bang for a buck for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm optimistic that we're going to see at least moderate to significant upswing, especially with the group that struggles. Just a thought.
That's great. Yeah. The nice thing about the screener is it gives us an opportunity to kind of take snapshots twice a year, especially on the ones that are below benchmark. So our central team will be looking at that data like at least twice a year.
Yeah.
And kind of making decisions about where our next steps on a district level and how do we track those students and those cohorts, right, over time.
Yeah, that's the key, I think, just to track it, because it's sort of going to be, proof of the pudding sort of thing. So.
And the thing too is there was a lot of training on the rollout, right? And then we take that training and turn it into support as we move forward by looking at the data, providing what's needed as we're going through this, getting feedback from teachers and staff on stuff as we're developing. So when implementation, it's always a wave, right? We go through, we learn how to do it more effectively each time we go through it. We're able to do it sooner. Staff are trained on it, so there'll be less staff to train. So that opens up more human resources as we progress through the process as well. So.
Go ahead, Kristen, do you want?
Sure. So just a couple of things. So I like the idea of the supporting reading instruction at home, right? I think especially for the younger ones, you know, that's like where it starts, right? So I know when I had my children, so the bedtime routine, right, you know, even as infants was to read to them and to talk to them, right? So that they had lots of words, you know, by the time they got to JK and SK. And what's interesting is that, so for your stats, it talked about in SK, you're at 60%, you know, exceeding the benchmark. And then all of a sudden down, you're dropping another third, right down to the 30s percent. So it was interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see why. And then have you looked at, you know, so for the SK to 2 overall pool results, so you have well above the benchmark and then well below the benchmark. You know, just like the backgrounds as to why, like socioeconomic, you know, those kind of things, you know, we can change stuff in the classroom to help, but is there things that we can, you know, change at home or prepare, you know, the students before they get to, you know, those grades to help them out?
Oh, those are great, certainly great points. That SK to 1 data has definitely come up, you know, in our discussions. The thing about Acadians and the screening tool that we're using is the benchmarks and the criteria change if you're screening in the beginning of the year versus the middle or the end of the year, and they get more complex. So that's something also, it's supposed to be a trajectory of learning kind of throughout the 3 grades, the second year kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2. So we, you know, we're aware of kind of the patterns and looking at that as a district to see where we need to move next. And every set of data is a new data, like I said, to analyze and kind of respond. So it's going to be a very responsive process, even after this second screening. And the other comment was that the well below research says the earlier interventions are the most impactful. So we're also going to be keeping that in mind, like you said, early kindergartens. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kristen, go ahead.
Thanks. Perhaps I'll just add a few more points to address some of your questions. What we have now with Acadians, with the screener that's been mandated through PPM 168, is we have a nice trajectory from senior kindergarten to grade 1 to grade 2 and then grade 3 with EQAO. And so we will be monitoring students over time, right? The students will be tracked from 1 year to the next in terms of their reading ability. And the screener will identify the strengths and the needs that students have with reading, that where then interventions can be put into place to close those gaps. And it's not to say that we didn't have those types of things in the past. We had other types of assessment, but they weren't grounded in structured literacy. They were grounded in a different approach to literacy instruction. And so now with the right to read, a stronger emphasis on phonics has come back. And that's where we are. Based on the science of reading. And so, so we have that nice trajectory. And so what we are hoping is that over time, and I think what Superintendent Cronwald was alluding to is right now, a lot of human resources are going into just training, like learning how to administer the screeners, learning how to use UFly, like as a, you know, because we're right at the beginning of the journey. Some educators are a little further along in terms of their understanding. But once we all become more proficient in administering the screener, analyzing the data, and then knowing what to do with, you know, as a result of the data, our take on this is that we should see a bigger increase over time, because we aren't going to put as much time and emphasis into, say, just simply training staff, right? The team can actually focus on, okay, now we have the data, now what do we do? So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other part is your question around like what factors are influencing students' ability to read, right? And there are many different factors that are at play. I know that later on in the meeting, the team will be sharing a renewed approach to school improvement planning. And part of that approach is the use of street data. And there is a video in the guide, which I know Chair Humphreys will highlight for the group. But that approach, so the Acadian screener gives, would we call that map data? I think so. You know, like it'll give us kind of the middle of the road in terms of, satellite data is like EQA, a really high level. The screening data is kind of, you use it to respond, but it's still fairly high level, it's standardized. But what we also really need to know is our individual students as students, and what other types of needs might they have, whether they're physical needs in the classroom. Some students might need some support with nutrition. There are a lot of different needs that our staff are working very hard to meet in the classroom. Mental health needs, some special education needs, like accommodations might be needed. And so the staff are working really hard to understand every individual student, so that they can make sure all those other supports are in place as well. Because it's not just about, I think what you're alluding to, Leo, we could be really good at UFly, but if we don't address all the other needs, we're still not going to see the improvement that we want to see. Because there are other needs. There are other needs that need to be addressed as well, right? And so that's why, we have a team of staff that are working together to identify the other needs as well. We're not looking at reading just in isolation.
Good.
Just want to add those pieces. Okay, Mike?
Just to add to what our directors just said, I look at this as teachers probably finding out earlier on and fitting pieces of a puzzle about specific students earlier, in part because of UFly. So to put it bluntly, I would see the teachers thinking, okay, these 4 students in my class, we seem to be networking really, really well with the home for whatever reasons. But maybe these 4 students, no matter what we've done or what we've tried, we realize now that for whatever reasons, we need to continue with these families and networking and do the best we can. But for whatever reason, some of you've touched on, it's just not working. Maybe it's a family in crisis. There could be all kinds of reasons. So I just think it develops their awareness earlier on about the specific individual needs within their classroom every day. A good teacher will figure that out fairly quickly, in part because of UFly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, looks like there's lots of work been done already. And so congratulations, Sarah, on that and leading, providing that leadership and getting all that training done. Is there more training yet to come, or most that? Or
Yeah. So yesterday and today we had kindergartens and ACEs come too. So we probably had 80 people the past 2 days.
wow, that's amazing.
It's awesome.
It's been a great day. So
Good. Well, I'm sure everybody's excited about it, and thank you for your leadership in this. It looks like we're going to be doing great things over the next while and making sure our kids can read to the best. And so fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Thanks.
There we go. All right, second agenda item, I believe, is talking about our calendar for next year, if we can imagine already. So Jacqueline, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Susan. This is the formal report as a follow-up for the from December's verbal that I provided. It does outline for you the process that we utilize in terms of coming up with a proposed calendar and the collaborative approach that we have with the Renfrew County Catholic District School Board. For reasons, of course, that people around this table know that are important, mostly around our transportation. But it is very nice to have a nice relationship with them in going through this process. And additionally, that the superintendent at Renfrew County Catholic, which was Heidi Fraser, and Jenny last year created a very specific terms of reference for the school calendar process, which is very helpful when I took that over this year. So that is referenced in the report as well, just in case people have questions about how we make determinations. This year's calendar is pretty straightforward. There were no major hiccups or conversations about where days should land. Renfrew County Catholic, there's a little bit back and forth about when the first PA day was with our district meeting. There was no discussion. Everybody thought it looked great with the proposal and that it all made very good sense. The way that the calendar falls, we would be starting off with a PA day following Labor Day, And then we will be ending the year on a Friday so that we don't have any carryover of PA days. So this report is seeking a recommendation, and unless there's questions first.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Questions, comments, wonderings about? Seemed pretty straightforward as well and logical. I personally appreciated the two versions that you sent out. I found that the Google Sheet version was also interesting to kind of look at, you know, the number of actual days and how all of the PA days kind of fit in, because I know there are several that are mandated by the ministry and others that we have some flexibility around. So
Yes.
really appreciate that as well.
Thanks.
So if we don't have any questions, we have a motion that the Board of Trustees approve the Renfrew County District School Board 2025-2026 school year calendar as presented in this report. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Trustee Dobson moved. Trustee Dobson moved. Trustee Rajamani seconded. All in favor of approving this, moving this forward? Excellent. Okay, and that's carried.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much. And then our third agenda item under the open session is the school improvement plan and department action plan processes. And I guess again, this is Jacqueline and Jenny show on this one as well. So to that.
It's mostly Jenny's show, and I'll tag on with a little tail piece.
Sounds good.
I'll start to speak a little bit about school improvement planning, and then Jacqueline will speak a little more specifically to departmental plans. So our purpose today is just to provide you with an update of where we are in our processes. Over the past year, we've brought updates about the work that we've been doing to evolve the school improvement planning process, both thinking about it post-COVID, but also in regards to ensuring our responsibilities and our commitment to dismantling barriers that exist for students and for families who have been historically marginalized and currently are marginalized in our system. So that's been a lot of our focus as we have been thinking about what our process needs to be in current times. And I know that we've told you about the inquiry that we launched last year, that we had a system-wide inquiry with that question: how might we engage in a holistic process that fosters ongoing growth so that more meaningful and equitable opportunities and outcomes for every learner are possible? And we really put a lot of thought into every one of those words and trying to think about making sure that we were capturing everything that we need to capture in terms of the outcome that we were hoping for. So this inquiry, as well as the requirements that came about through the student achievement plan process that happened last year, contributed to the revised guide as it stands right now, which was linked into the report, which we have had a chance to have a look at. And we won't review the guide with you in totality, but in the report, we highlighted for you some of the key aspects that we're focusing on this year in terms of implementation. So I'll just touch a little bit on those and expand that a little bit for you. So we've been supporting the work of school improvement planning at each of our leadership team meetings this year, each time going a little bit deeper into the cycle with our principals and vice principals, helping to build their understanding of the process and develop it together as we go and learn and reflect on where we are and where we need to go next. We've also really been thinking about data literacy, and that was a commitment that we made that we want to support data literacy. So focusing on expanding the types of data that we use, ensuring we're using effective consultation methods, getting the voices of our students and our families to help us determine our areas of growth, and not solely operating on our assumptions or even sometimes what we think that higher level data might be telling us. Right? Sometimes we can look at a piece of data and say, oh, it says this. But when we dig into it further and we ask good questions, and we investigate further, it might be that might be part of the story, but it may not be the whole story. So we want to be able to think carefully about making sure that we're identifying the right work to spend our time on, because our time is limited. And with that, we have also been focusing on the key data that we want to consistently refer to guide our progress, and mainly connected to the student achievement plan. So the required ministry indicators, but also the ones that we have added as a district to focus on. So we've been working on building skills with our administrators of where to find and access that data. And we're continuing to work towards having a data dashboard where that will be more of a one-stop live source of data that can help schools to determine where we are. We're not there yet, and we're working towards that over the course of this year. We've also really been thinking about school improvement planning work as a means to continue building collective capacity in our buildings. and thinking about staff engagement in that learning as well. So as we've been moving through the SIP cycle and at our leadership team meetings, we've been trying to model, learning about and modeling the types of participatory leadership strategies that might be useful in leading school improvement planning at the school level. And we're doing that because we believe that this will help to support engagement in the process for all staff and contribute positively to staff culture. And we base that on the fact that we know we have incredibly talented staff in all of our school buildings. And this work is one of the ways that we're bringing focus to helping to identify our areas of growth, because knowing that when we do, we know that our committed and professional staff that we have in place, they will be engaged in wanting to improve outcomes for all of our students. So helping this process and just bringing nice focus and light to that part of the work. So schools are at different stages in terms of implementation, and we're fully supportive of that and aware of that. We're trying some things on this year. We're learning. We're starting to dig in, but we're realistic about the time that school leaders have to be able to dedicate to the school improvement planning work at the school. We know that there are some challenges with release, which is when some of this work may have happened in big groups in the past. So that's a reality, and the time to be able to spend at professional learning days, like you mentioned already, many of them are already dedicated to other things. So we are learning and we're supporting and we're being realistic around where we are, knowing that as we continue to do so, we're just building our foundation, our capacity, so that we'll be in a better place next year, and then the next year will be even in a stronger place after that. Yeah, I think that's it for me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So just adding on to that, we did want to also share what we've been doing in terms of the departments and the business side of things. During our leadership meetings, the senior managers are attending, and it has been important for us that they both are part of that participatory leadership piece, but that they see themselves also in the conversation around improvement planning as a goal, and that the cycle that we're using does apply to them as well. What we did at the start of this year is we took the template that Jenny and her team had developed for program services in schools specifically, and we modified it a bit for the departments. And then using that template, have asked the departments to consider what, their plans might be, what evidence they may be looking for. The conversations at the leadership team meetings are helping to provide an opportunity for senior managers to learn from each other, but also an opportunity for them to engage with principals as well and learn from their experiences. I think that similar to what Jenny said about schools being at different stages, the departments are at different stages in the process. But really thinking about how this could be helpful is that we want to see some growth in departments, some intentionality around goals, and an opportunity for feedback around what departments are considering and how that feeds into the larger goals that we have in the strat plan, for example, and also an increased sense of accountability. Not to say that the departments have not been accountable, but just a different type of accountability where we're feeling a little more focused and precise in how we're developing and growing in that area. I think that also, for me, my reflection is that we have our departments not feeling so much a solo operation, but the recognition that as senior managers, they're there to help and support each other. And that's what exec is for too. And that we're all coming together like-minded and invested in the same goals.
Okay, thanks. Questions, comments?
Sure, I'll go ahead.
I have a list, but go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I just look forward to our own strat plan, coming up, right? It's just the amount of work and detail that's going into this. But also the struggle to try and align, right? The student achievement plan, the SIP plan, the school improvement plan, the family to schools improvement plan, right? There's lots of improvement plans.
Yeah.
I think we have to improve the improvement plans to make it. But, so just look forward to, just based on this work, looking forward to getting our own strat plan going. And yeah, it's just, I don't think you left anything out. I don't know what there is to improve on, right? Yeah, just lots of good work. Thank you.
Do you have anything, Mike?
Just briefly, I just like the philosophy of sort of the right hand knowing what the left hand is doing and being closer when it comes to different levels of, from teachers to principals to superintendents, just that, I don't know if I'm choosing the right words, but I just think that cohesiveness so that there isn't that maybe at times, years back gone by, that traditional some distance and it's more on the same page and being somewhat collaborative. So I just hope, and I would cautiously say that I do think that the majority of the staff would feel comfortable genuinely sharing, whether it's not just positive or neutral, but if there's something that's a concern, I would hope that they would have enough courage and encouraged to also bring that up. So thank you.
Just a couple of things I wondered about. It sort of feels like this is a fairly fundamental change from previous approaches to planning. Am I correct in assuming that?
From the business side, I would say that
Sure.
we are formalizing what has always been done informally. So it's not so new. I like the word accountability, but it's also like, oh my gosh, we do a lot, right? Because there's just so much, it's just such an integral part of what is done on the business side. So it's nice to sort of step back and add a little bit of intentionality because we do sort of operate at a very busy cyclical nature. So it's an opportunity to pause and ensure that our efforts are being placed where we need them to be. But yes, it formalizing the process is definitely, but it's good.
And I would say, like, from human resources aspect, I think it is helping us to focus on not losing sight of some of the goals. Like, maybe I align myself more with being at a school because, like, as the principal, you're in the office and then the phone rings and you got a parent or somebody else calling or a kid, and that happens in human resources a lot, right? And then you're like, oh gosh, what are those goals that we were focusing on? So we've been using them in our department meetings to go back to them. How are we, making sure that we're attending to those and still making progress forward, or, setting up those meetings, having those conversations, so that we don't get to the end of a year or two and go, oh gosh, we just didn't get there, right? Like, because it's
easy to do.
It's easy to do. So from my perspective, it is a big change. Yes.
It does sound like, particularly the department level, it sounds really great to think that you're not feeling to be quite so siloed and that everybody's in the same, we're here for the same purpose, right?
Right.
And I guess I wondered, even from the school perspective, is there more an understanding of kind of what the administrative departments do in support of? Because there's always that issue, right? Of if you're in the field or if you're in head office, that's from my paradigm anyway. You always think that the other guy doesn't do anything, or don't really understand how they support each other, right? And so I wondered if you have a feeling that is also supporting that better understanding of the bigger picture.
I think that's part of our intentionality of having, we had moved away in terms of our leadership meetings, not really including managers as much, or maybe have one manager representative who might bring back information to the other managers, but really thinking about, like, when we do our planning, we make a chart, we have a column for managers, and we think about, is the activity or the learning or whatever we're doing with the principals, is it beneficial for the managers, or should we augment it and have something else? And then they come back. But what I do think is that by having multiple opportunities throughout the day where it's the whole group together and there's conversations, both parties kind of thing are learning about each other's work.
That getting together, that networking conversation, often informally, is tremendously valuable.
That's right.
Recognize that in all kinds of business situations.
And answering questions in those processes that are very reflective. So, you know, principals sharing, here are the things that maybe I'm struggling with, here are the goals that I'm setting. I'm wondering how I'm going to get there, and departments, you know, senior managers being able to say very similar things, like here are the things I'm struggling with, but here's a goal I set, but I'm not sure about what's your feedback. Those are, you know, we're hoping to build those more authentic conversations.
Wonderful. Kristen, go ahead. Just to, I think Jacqueline's last points kind of captured what I was going to share. I was just going to say that the team has been creating opportunities where so far it's been principals and vice principals hosting little table conversations about their school improvement plan to get feedback. And we're hoping tomorrow at our leadership meeting, there will be 8 other schools that do that, where we have 8 tables, conversations. We're hoping that 2 of the tables will actually be senior managers hosting conversations about their department action plan or improvement plan, so that they can, and so that would be an example of an opportunity where the school principals and vice principals in that group will hear about, like, in more detail about the department's improvement goals. And then we'll have an opportunity to also give feedback or like ask questions or support, right? So that, because the process that the 2 groups are following is very, very similar. Just the what is different. Yeah. But they support each other. So the better understanding of what each other does makes a huge difference. Yeah.
The only other comment I would make is I was saying to Kristen earlier, I did take a look at this morning, and on the 3rd or 4th page, there's a link to a video called Street Data. And I would really recommend that you take a look at that. I clicked on it this morning. I wonder what this is. And it's very interesting to better understand what they're talking about around street data versus satellite data versus map data. So I'd really recommend you take a look at that. It's almost an hour long, so you can't kind of do it in, 15 minutes, but it's well worth the time, and I think it really helps. It helped me understand kind of the bigger picture of what you're hoping to accomplish with this kind of work and this approach that obviously is going to be better for our students. And that's really what it's about, right? That's why we're here. We want them to have the best experience possible. So anyway, I recommend that you take a look at that if you haven't already. So that's my recommendation. But thank you for that. Thank you for all the work that you've done on this. This is amazing. I think it's really moving. It sounds like it's moving us forward in such positive ways. That's only going to be a benefit to the organization and to the students, right, and families. So thank you for all of that. Really, really interesting stuff. Okay, we are going into a closed session, so I need a motion to move into close, please. Trustee Gannett, thank you. And a seconder, Trustee Boland, thank you very much. All those in favor of moving into closed? And that is carried. I don't think we have any other items on the agenda. I think most of you know that the Public Education Symposium is next week in Toronto, and I believe Carthy and Dave and Leo and I are attending. So we'll look forward to bringing back some good information for you, hopefully at the following meeting. And then I guess we'll see the rest of you at board. So yes, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.